This is the kind of text message that freezes your blood. Not a threat, not bad news, just 5 words that shattered my entire Thursday night. Come upstairs, but don't knock. I'm Alex, 22, and my life basically revolved around my worn-out leather couch, microwave ramen, and trying to pass my final year of college. My roommate, Mark, was the kind of guy who left his dirty socks everywhere but was genuinely a good friend. He also had an older sister, Chloe. Chloe was a ghost in our apartment complex. She lived 2 floors up, an artist who worked from home, and she was always quiet, always busy, and always kept to herself. If I saw her once a month in the laundry room, that was a lot. She had this way of looking at you, not in a judging way, but like she was observing something much deeper than your actual existence. She had striking blue eyes and a permanent air of mystery, the kind of person you never felt comfortable just waving at. Tonight, Mark was gone. He'd driven an hour upstate to see his girlfriend, leaving me with the entire noisy, drafty apartment to myself. I was planning on an all-night gaming session, headphones on, world tuned out. That plan lasted until 1:07 a.m., when my phone buzzed with the unfamiliar number and the impossible message. I stared at the screen, and my heart immediately started that frantic drumbeat you get when you know, deep down, something is terribly wrong. It was Chloe's number. But why would she be texting me? We'd never exchanged more than 3 words in the 2 years we'd lived in the same building. And why the cryptic "don't knock"? The whole situation felt like a scene ripped straight out of a low-budget thriller. Only this was my actual life, and I was the reluctant main character. A million scenarios flashed through my mind. Was she hurt? Was it some kind of prank? Did Mark put her up to this? No, Mark would never pull a stunt this elaborate, especially not in the middle of the night. Plus, the tone wasn't playful. It was urgent, almost desperate. The silence in my apartment suddenly felt heavy, thick with unseen possibilities. Every creak of the floorboards above sounded like a siren. I tried calling Mark, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted Chloe back, "Is everything okay?" The 3 dots appeared immediately, then vanished. No reply, just the terrifying instruction hanging in the digital air. Come upstairs, but don't knock. My hand was shaking as I grabbed my phone and started moving toward the door. I knew I should just ignore it, go back to my game, and wait until morning, but the thought of her needing help, alone, 2 floors up, wouldn't let me breathe. The hallway light was flickering as I stepped out of my apartment, pulled by a sense of duty I couldn't explain and a fear I couldn't ignore. I took the first step onto the cold concrete stairwell, listening for any sound from her apartment, completely unprepared for the silence that met me. What exactly was waiting for me 2 flights up behind that quiet door? I was about to find out, and I had a terrible feeling that once I knew, I could never go back to my simple life again. The building itself was part of the problem. It was old brick, built maybe 60 years ago, and everything echoed. The stairs groaned under my weight, each step sounding like a gunshot in the dead quiet of the night. I tried walking on the edges, holding my breath, keenly aware that I was breaking the cardinal rule of apartment living. Don't make noise after midnight. My relationship with Mark, my roommate, was the only reason I was even here. We met in orientation and instantly clicked. 2 average guys trying to navigate college life without falling into debt or despair. Mark was open, easy to read, and totally drama-free. This made his sister, Chloe, even more of an enigma. Mark rarely spoke about her, only mentioning she was intense and needed her space. I'd always respected that boundary. Chloe's door was a fortress. I'd never seen the inside of her apartment, and now I was walking toward it in the pitch black. I remembered the one time I actually spoke to her. It was last summer. I was carrying a huge, dripping box of frozen groceries, and the door to our ground floor apartment stuck. Chloe was coming down the stairs, and she stopped, not saying a word, just watching me wrestle with the lock. When I finally yanked the door open, she simply nodded, her expression unreadable, and went on her way. It wasn't rude, but it certainly wasn't friendly. She moved through the world like a shadow observing the light. This complete lack of connection is what made the text message so terrifying. If she needed something simple, she would text Mark or call the building manager. Reaching out to me, the near stranger on the 2nd floor, meant her normal channels were blocked. It meant whatever was happening upstairs was personal, immediate, and maybe even dangerous. I reached the third-floor landing, the air suddenly colder, smelling faintly of old dust and something metallic. Her apartment was at the end of the hall. I could see the narrow crack of light underneath her door, a reassuring flicker of life that did nothing to calm my racing mind. I tiptoed down the last few feet. The door was a solid, heavy slab of wood. I lifted my hand, ready to follow the instructions, ready to just push the door open, but my fingers froze inches from the cool metal handle. I leaned in, pressing my ear against the wood, listening for any sign of a struggle, a voice, anything. The apartment was absolutely silent. The kind of silence that feels louder than noise. Was she passed out? Was someone else in there? I remembered the cryptic instruction, don't knock. If I knocked, would I alert someone inside who shouldn't be there? Or would I shatter some delicate, necessary quiet that she was desperately trying to maintain? My heart hammered against my ribs, demanding I make a move, but I couldn't decide which choice was more dangerous. Disobeying the text, or obeying it completely without knowing what awaited me. With my palms sweating and my gut screaming at me to run back downstairs, I slowly reached for the doorknob, wondering if this was the last sane moment of my life. I finally pushed the door inward, using just my fingertips. It didn't creak, which was strange for this old building. It just whispered open a few inches, revealing a sliver of the apartment. I squeezed through the opening, careful not to let the heavy wood hit the frame. The air inside was instantly different. It was stale, heavy, and smelled faintly of paint and cheap disinfectant. I couldn't see Chloe yet. The living room was dark, but a warm, yellowish light spilled from a partially open door down the short hallway. What must have been the bedroom? My eyes darted around the living room. It was messy, but not in a typical clutter way. It was disorganized with a purpose. Canvas rolls were stacked against the wall, half-empty coffee mugs sat on precarious towers of books, and there was a strange, deep red stain on the white rug that made my stomach clench. It looked too dark to be wine, Chloe. I whispered, my voice thick with anxiety. The sound felt weak, easily swallowed by the heavy silence. Then, from the bedroom doorway, a shadow moved. Chloe stepped into the light, and I instantly knew this wasn't the reserved, distant woman I'd seen in the laundry room. Her eyes were wide, bright with a panic I could feel across the room. Her hair was a mess, and she was wearing clothes she must have slept in. The most unsettling thing, though, was her hand. She was pressing the palm of her hand to her mouth, not to shush me, but like she was desperately trying to stop herself from making a sound, any sound at all. She didn't speak. She didn't wave me in. She didn't even relax when she saw it was me. Instead, she took one slow, deliberate step back, her eyes fixed not on me, but on something just behind my shoulder, near the door I'd just entered through. A sudden, cold wave of dread washed over me. I wanted to turn around, to see what she was looking at, but her terrifyingly intense gaze held me in place. Then, with an agonizing slowness, she lifted her free hand and pointed. Her finger was shaking violently, pointing not at me, but down, at the floor, right near my feet. I finally tore my eyes away from hers and looked down, ready to see a note, a weapon, anything. Instead, I saw a thin, black object half hidden under a stack of newspapers. As I squinted in the dim light, my blood ran cold. It wasn't just an object. It was a wire, a long, black audio cable, that snaked from underneath the front door, across the rug, and disappeared into the shadowed hallway near the bedroom. Before I could even process what that meant, I heard it. A barely audible click from the other side of the door. Someone was on the landing, and whatever was outside, Chloe was terrified they might have heard me come in. I turned toward the door, just as Chloe mouthed two simple, terrifying words at me from the hallway. The attic. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. Chloe's absolute terror was more persuasive than any explanation could ever be. The click from the other side of the door was instantly followed by the faint scrape of metal. Someone was tampering with the lock. I knew I had seconds that I ran to the hallway, following Chloe, who was already moving with a desperate urgency toward a small, nearly invisible door tucked beside a linen closet. It was the entry to the building's maintenance attic, usually bolted shut and ignored. As I reached her, she was fumbling with a small, tarnished key on a chain around her neck. Her fingers were shaking so hard she dropped it. It hit the wooden floor with a sound that felt deafening, echoing the sound of the growing noise at the front door. I immediately dropped to my knees, scrambling for the key, my eyes flicking back toward the apartment's entryway. If whoever was out there got in, we were trapped in the short, narrow hallway. I finally snatched the cold metal key. Just as I handed it to her, the heavy thump of a shoulder hitting the front door rattled the entire frame. "Hurry," I hissed. She jammed the key into the attic lock, twisting it hard. The lock clicked, but the door was sticky. She pulled once, twice, putting her whole shoulder into it, and finally, the small door groaned inward, revealing a gap of inky darkness and the faint, dusty smell of insulation and old wood. "Go, now," she whispered, her voice raw that I didn't need to be told twice. I lunged into the opening, pulling myself up through the gap. The attic was suffocating, hot, dark, and filled with sharp, itchy insulation. I crawled a few feet away from the opening, hiding myself behind a massive, rusting water heater. Chloe slid in after me, pulling the small, heavy door shut. She didn't latch it. She just held it pressed closed with the weight of her body, breathing hard. Then, we waited. Below us, we heard the loud, unmistakable thwack of the main door being kicked open. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and slow, entered the apartment. They were not stealthy footsteps. They were the sound of someone completely unafraid of being heard. I crouched lower, barely daring to breathe. My ears strained, trying to map the intruder's movements. They moved through the living room, paused by the strange red stain on the rug, and then the steps started coming closer, moving down the hallway, directly toward our hiding place. Every fiber of my body was screaming that we'd been followed, that this entire thing, the text, the open door, was a setup. The footsteps stopped directly beneath us. The silence was absolute, broken only by Chloe's shallow, ragged breathing next to me. Then, a low, gravelly voice echoed up the walls, so close it felt like the speaker was right outside our door. "I know you're here, Chloe, and I know you found my equipment." My blood ran cold. The wire. The recording equipment. This wasn't a robbery or a random attack. This was targeted, and the man downstairs knew exactly what Chloe had found. We were listening to a predator, and he was hunting in the dark. I watched Chloe's face in the sliver of light filtering through a tiny attic vent, and her expression wasn't just fear. It was pure, terrifying realization. The voice called out again, right below the attic entrance, just before he made the move that changed everything. He didn't try to open the closet door. He said one last thing, a name that made me realize I wasn't just hiding with a frightened neighbor, but with someone who had stumbled onto a massive secret. "And you brought Alex, didn't you?" Smart move. His voice, cold, confident, and knowing my name, was a punch to the gut. How did he know me? I immediately glanced at Chloe, trying to convey 1,000 terrified questions with my eyes. She didn't look at me. She was staring blankly at the dark wood of the attic door, and then a single tear tracked down her cheek. That's when the truly shocking reality hit me, not from the man below, but from Chloe herself. She took her hand off the small door, letting it fall against her leg. She slowly turned her head toward me, her blue eyes filled with an unspeakable sorrow that completely eclipsed her fear. She didn't whisper, she didn't mouth words. She spoke softly, clearly, in a voice that was utterly defeated, yet entirely composed. "Alex," she said, her voice barely a breath. "That wire you saw? It was live. And the man downstairs, the man who knows your name, he didn't just break in. He lives here. He's the building manager. He's been listening to all of us for months." My brain struggled to process this. The man who fixed our leaky faucets, who collected our rent checks, the friendly guy in the lobby, was a listener, a spy, and now a hunter. But the worst part was the way she delivered the message, not as a secret she was just realizing, but as a confession. She knew this already. She knew who he was. Why bring me into it? Why risk my life? Before I could accuse her, before I could demand an explanation for why I was hiding in an attic with a known criminal, the attic door below us shuddered. He wasn't kicking anymore. He was using a key. The small attic door below us didn't just rattle. It slowly began to unlock. The key turned with 2 heavy, distinct clicks. The building manager, the friendly Mr. Davison, was coming in. We were cornered. Chloe suddenly grabbed my hand, squeezing it tight. This wasn't a gesture of comfort. It was a signal. She leaned in, her voice now a desperate plea of final instruction. "He collects evidence. He doesn't kill people, but he destroys lives. He uses the recordings to blackmail everyone. You have to get to the server. The server, Alex. Now, before I could ask what server she meant, she pushed me, hard, further back into the cramped, dusty recesses of the attic. Then, she did the unthinkable. As the attic door creaked open, casting a narrow, blinding stripe of light into our hiding spot, Chloe didn't stay hidden. She moved. She darted forward and launched herself out of the opening, landing silently on the floor below, directly facing the building manager. "Looking for this, Mr. Davison," she said, holding up a small, black USB drive, the storage for the damning wire recording she'd found. The manager froze. The surprise on his face was total. He hadn't expected her to surrender, much less confront him. This was my moment. Following the path she had cleared for me, I crawled rapidly toward the back of the attic, where the ceiling slanted sharply down. My hand brushed against a thick cluster of cables and a large, oddly quiet metal box tucked deep into the corner. The server. The shouting started below. Davison's voice was high, frantic. "Give me that, Chloe. You don't know what you're messing with." "I know everything," she shot back. "I know about the mayor, the councilman, and the money you extorted from my brother, Mark." Mark. That was the missing piece. The blackmail wasn't random. It was personal. Chloe hadn't brought me into danger. She had planned this escape and confrontation to protect her younger brother. I realized her text message, "Come upstairs, but don't knock," wasn't just to save her, but to recruit the only person she knew was in the building. Giving me a head start on finding the real evidence, A.S. Davison lunged for her. I gripped the heavy, cold server box with both hands. It was tethered by a half-dozen cables. With a final surge of adrenaline, I ripped it free from the wall, the loud, snapping sound of broken wires echoing through the silent apartment building. The attic instantly went dark as the server's small indicator lights died, plunging the complex's hidden audio grid into silence. The man below screamed, a raw sound of fury and defeat. I heard a scuffle, then the sickening thud of a body hitting the wall. I knew Chloe had bought me time, but at what cost? Just as I heard a siren wailing faintly in the distance, the sound of the Real cavalry arriving, I realized I still held the USB drive I thought was the evidence that I looked down at the server I was clutching. The USB drive I had just ripped out was labeled, chillingly, backup. The true, original files were still inside the manager's ruined server, proving everything. But the USB in my hand wasn't the backup. It was the only way Chloe could have known all those specific names. It was her own personal, secret recording of Mark's confession, a confession that proved her desperate sacrifice had saved not only Mark, but me too. The sound of the sirens grew louder, their red and blue lights flashing through the tiny attic vent, painting the dust motes in the air with frantic colors. I stayed crouched there, holding the now silent server box, my chest heaving, listening to the culmination of Chloe's plan unfold below. The police had arrived. When the officers finally made it upstairs, guided by the unmistakable sounds of the struggle, they found Mr. Davison pinned against the wall by a fearless, exhausted Chloe. The USB drive, containing Mark's desperate plea about the blackmail and the evidence of Davison's listening network, was immediately handed over. My arrival, the ripped server, and Chloe's prepared statement were the final nails in the manager's coffin. He was taken away in handcuffs, his reign of silent surveillance finally over. Later that morning, sitting on my worn-out leather couch with 2 mugs of lukewarm coffee, I finally got the full story from Mark. Mark had racked up a huge debt, and Mr. Davison, who had been listening to every anxious phone call and argument, used the recordings to start extorting him. Chloe had discovered the microphone wire taped under Mark's bed only a few weeks ago. She didn't trust the police yet, knowing Davison was too slippery, too entrenched. She needed a witness, someone who could confirm her suspicions and provide cover while she neutralized the main system. The server. The terrifying text to me wasn't random. It was a calculated risk. She had seen me interact with Mark enough to know I was trustworthy, and she knew I was home alone that night. She opened the door just enough for me to see the wire, gave me the key to the attic, and then sacrificed her own safety to create the diversion I needed to destroy the core of the operation. That my relationship with Chloe changed forever that night. She was no longer the mysterious, distant artist. She was the protector, the quiet strategist, The guardian angel who knew exactly what needed to be done when her brother, and by extension, me, was in danger. We didn't talk about what happened in the attic. We didn't need to. A shared moment of life or death crisis often forms a stronger bond than years of casual conversation. The building felt different now. The silence was clean, not heavy with unspoken fear. The black wire had been the visible thread of a much larger web of deceit, and by finding it, Chloe had not only saved her brother from financial ruin, but she had restored a fundamental piece of trust to an entire community. That morning, before the police finished their investigation and before she went back up to her quiet apartment, she stopped at my door. She didn't knock. She just stood there, holding a tiny, intricate sketch she'd clearly drawn overnight. A sketch of my face, looking determined, framed by the dark, dusty corner of the attic. "Thank you, Alex," she said, her blue eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "You saved us, Chloe," I replied, taking the drawing. She just smiled a small, tired smile, and that was it. She closed her door, and I went back to my life, but I was no longer the same. I learned that night that the quietest people often carry the biggest burdens, and that true courage isn't loud or flashy. It's just showing up when you're terrified and being ready to push a stranger into an attic to save the people you love. But the most memorable thing? The very next day, I found a tiny, beautiful ceramic owl she'd painted taped to my front door, a silent guardian. It's still there. And that, everyone, is the story of how my roommate's older sister, the quiet woman I barely knew, gave me the scariest night of my life, and in doing so, taught me what real family means.